Hey folks, it's Coach William and Sherri here from the Savvy Inspector. And today we brought on board Mr. Steven Brewer, CPA. Welcome, Steve.
Good morning. Hi everybody. Good to talk to you.
Hey, Steve. Glad to have you on board. Today we've got one of our hot topics. Sherri and I, through coaching, this comes up over and over again. And the question is, should my inspectors be paid as employees or independent contractors? Again, this gets tossed back and forth a lot. Some folks believe strongly one way, some believe strongly the other, and I know for a fact from talking to you that the law is pretty clear on this. So I want to address that this morning and maybe save some people some heartache down the road for, paying independent contractor when they should be the other way or vice versa. So let's talk about that. I'll just open up with the very first slide here, and the question is, of course, when is a worker an employee and when is he or she an independent contractor?
Well, let's say this. With an employee, there's a lot more requirements that you have to go to. With an employee, you have to withhold the income taxes, both federal, state, and possibly local. You have to withhold the employee portion and also pay an employer portion of the Social Security and Medicare taxes, also known as FICA taxes. And then you also have to pay unemployment taxes, so for unemployment insurance on those employees. Also, you have to carry workers' compensation on employees. Now, with an independent contractor, it's much more simpler. You have come to an agreed-upon set amount to pay that independent contractor. You don't withhold taxes, you don't pay employer taxes, and you have no other obligations to that worker once the job is done. Now, as you can see, it's more costly to have an employee than it is an independent contractor. You have to possibly provide certain benefits, such as vacations, sick days, insurance, where you don't provide those things for an independent contractor. You've got employer taxes. You have with workers' compensation insurance. You have to carry on your workers, but not on your independent contractors. On average, we see that an employee will cost you 20% more than above the hourly wage rate that you set. So if you have a $10 an hour employee, the actual cost of that employee is more like $12 an hour, time you consider all that you have to pay for on them. One of the reasons this questions brought up a lot is the IRS has made this a hot button issue. They are really looking into this when it comes to audits of businesses. They're looking to see who is classified as independent contractors and whether they really should be. It's a very dangerous area when you come to an audit, and the taxpayer better be prepared if they are audited by the IRS to be able to substantiate why someone's an independent contractor and why they're not. IRS is really hitting a lot of businesses in this area with back taxes, penalties, and interest. And just remember, if the IRS comes calling and they find this, all the other tax agencies out there, the state, the local, state unemployment, are going to come looking too once that one determination is made.
So we really get a snowball effect there once once we get that ball rolling. It's not a good position to be in. So very important, if you've heard that, very important to make this determination. So let's look at it, Steve, starting with the employee. What is it that makes a worker an employee?
Okay, we're going to look back at common law. And common law definition of an employee is anyone who you hire who performs services for you, and you can control what will be done and how it will be done. If you have the right as the business to control all the details of how the service is performed, when it's performed, then that worker is considered to be an employee.
Okay, and so I think that's pretty cut and dry. There are some questions I know that we get, but about that, will I schedule the times that they will be there, but it's their choice to accept that time frame or not. So those kind of things come into play, which we'll discuss as we move on to this. So that kind of defines the employee. Let's talk about the contractor here. The next slide you got up. What is it that makes an independent contractor versus the employee?
Okay, so if you bring a worker into your business and you as a business only have the right to control or direct only the result of the work and not how it will be done or when it will be done, then that worker is generally considered an independent contractor. If you can only determine if the final product is acceptable and nothing else about it, then an independent contractor situation exists between you two. That independent contractor must have the freedom to accomplish the tasks that you request as he or she sees fit. They use their own tools, they determine their own schedule, and materials that are acceptable to both parties.
Let's see, and that's where I think a lot of the confusion comes in, trying to determine if I am setting their schedule, if I am, how much control you have over that inspector. And a lot of these folks that have multiple inspectors, paying them as independent contractors, by my definition of going through this, looks like they should be employees. So that's my big concern, to make sure everybody understands that. So I think we're pretty clear on that. The next question, of course, I know that there are factors which we need to look at when we try to determine proper employee contractor classification. So I think this is kind of where we get into the nuts and bolts of it. So let's talk about that, Steve. Try to determine proper employee or contractor classification.
Okay. Common law looks at three basic factors when it comes down to this control factor: behavioral, financial, and the type of relationship.
And these factors, there's factors which we need to look at determining that proper employee contractor classification. So I guess you're just going to go through these, and the first one's going to be behavioral. So let's define that, make sure everybody understands that part of it.
Okay, in the behavioral area, we look at four things. First off, the type of instructions given. If you're telling the employee when and where to work, what tools or equipment to use, if they can hire workers and fire workers, where to purchase their supplies and materials, make an order or sequence in the following work, and how the work is to be done, then that's a type of instructions given that could lead to an employee situation. What degree of instruction do you give them? If the more detailed the instructions are to this worker that you give to them, then that's more of an employee situation. Do you have an evaluation system for that person? In other words, are you setting details of the work to measure them against? We have that situation in an employee where we're measuring each of the steps that they're doing. With an independent contractor, all we worry about is the final result. Are you providing training? If you're providing training, normally you don't do that for an independent contractor. You do that for your employees so that you can guarantee they're doing things the way you want them done. So if you're providing training, you're leaning towards that employee situation much more than if you're not.
Right. And, just from the behavioral side of it here, folks, if you're listening in, I mean, how many of us out there, and on my own firm, we have an extensive training program that these guys have to go through. We evaluate them quarterly and at the end of the year for pay raises. We do give them instructions, when they're going to be there, who to talk to, who to make contact with, who to deliver the reports to. There's a lot of instruction that goes on there. So in my mind, right off the bat, the very first one under behavioral makes it pretty clear that an inspector hired under your firm should be an employee versus a contractor. Let's go on with it, Steve. Let's talk about the financial part of it. Okay.
Under the financial part, we're going to look at the business aspects of the job. First off, somewhere there's an investment made up front. Buying equipment, setting up training programs. Who's bearing the cost of that? If the business is bearing the cost, we're leaning towards employee. Unreimbursed expenses. An independent contractor normally is going to have unreimbursed expenses. An employee is not. The independent contractor is just paid a set amount to cover his time, expenses, etc. in there. And as he incurs those, he doesn't ask for a reimbursement. So an independent contractor has unreimbursed expenses. The next thing in financial is who has the opportunity to make a profit or a loss on this particular job that we're doing. If that opportunity is in the business side, then that person is an employee. If the worker bears the possibility of making a profit off of it, then they're an independent contractor. So we have to look at profit and loss opportunity. Does that worker market their services to the public? If they don't, if they're working really exclusively for you, well, that leans more into an employee situation. Now, if they are marketing their services and performing the same work for other people, and they have unreimbursed expenses, they're making their own investment, then we're leaning towards an independent contractor situation. Method of payment is another financial factor we look at. If the worker is guaranteed a regular wage amount, be it hourly, weekly, commission, and he's guaranteed that, then he's an employee. An independent contractor is just usually paid a fixed fee for a job. So he's not guaranteed that he's going to receive $10 an hour to do his job. He's going to be said, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to do this job. So those are some of the financial factors that we have to look at if we're trying to determine is someone a worker or an employee or a independent contractor.
Exactly. And I just thinking through those, you go, just trying to, compare my firm, the way we're set up, and I'm sure most everybody out there is, working closely in the same manner. So as far as the investment part of that, most folks or most firms will have some type of an equipment fund, or they're splitting the cost of the equipment. I just talked to another inspector, a friend of mine who's got a fairly large firm, and they were talking about, for instance, these new GoPro cameras that the guys can use. So he doesn't buy those and give those to the guys. He'll split the cost with them. So if it costs them a couple $100, he's going to throw in $100 bill. So there is some investment there. And in our case, we do supply, all of that equipment. So definitely on our side, there's an investment. On the reimbursed or unreimbursed, are you reimbursing them for their gas? Are they paying their own tools, uniforms? I guess would all fall under that as well. Steve, would you see that?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So anybody I know almost every. Matter of fact, I don't think I know of any inspection firms out there that are not in uniform. So that's a perfect example. The profit and loss opportunity in my firm, and I think it's pretty much that way across the board, the inspector gets paid regardless of what happens on that inspection. They perform the work, so as a business owner, I pay my inspectors, and it's me who takes the profit or loss, even if the client doesn't pay. That inspector still gets paid, so I think that's pretty cut and dry. And then, you touched on services marketed to the public. Anybody that's in my shoes as an owner of a firm, one of the very first things we learned to step into this position and grow your business is to stop marketing yourself as a home inspector and become a marketer of home inspection services. So if you're in that position as I am, you are definitely marketing to the public, and your employees or inspectors are not. So I think that's pretty cut and dry. And then some folks pay off of commission. We pay a flat fee, but regardless, you are making that payment to the inspector. It's not a direct collection from the client. So I think every one of those points hits home with us as inspection firms. So
good examples there, William. That's great to hear from you guys how it's affected you.
Yeah, and as we go through here, because I'm sure the folks listening in are like, well, that particular item that we named off doesn't account to me, and this one does, and this one doesn't. So what I'm getting at, Steve, is we go through here and say here we talked about unreimbursed expenses. Well, that doesn't pertain to me, so that automatically kicks me out. I mean, is it that cut and dry, or is it just if any one of these?
It's not 100%. 100% of these do not have to be in place to be classified as an employee. We're looking at the overall situation of which ones do apply and how much of the ones that do apply you're actually, it's impacting your business.
Excellent.
So yes, you don't have unreimbursed expenses, but so that doesn't mean that those aren't employees. That just means we don't look at that factor for you.
Great.
You still have investment. You still have profit opportunity. You still have behavioral factors.
Right.
If more of those are being you're being affected by those are the determining factors as to whether you're a employee or a independent contractor.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody, because I know that would be the first question that I get. So,
right.
So perfect. Okay. Let's see. That was the financial part.
And so let's go down.
I think relationship is what we want to talk about. Yeah, the type of relationship. So let's get into that, the relationship between the inspector and the employee or employer.
Okay. Sometimes a business will have a contract between itself and a possible worker. Well, and maybe that contract says, I'm going to treat you as an independent contractor. That contract really is not worth anything when it comes to the determination of an employee and an independent contractor. We have to look at all these other factors. There are court cases, there's audit results where the IRS has come in and these contracts have been in place and the IRS said, nope, that does not apply. We're going to look at all these other factors, and those people that you said in a contract were independent contractors are really employees. So don't think a contract is going to get you out of this. Contracts are really, in this case, are not worth anything. Are you offering employee benefits? Are you offering a benefit such as insurance, paid vacation, sick leave, time off for family leave, things like that. You don't give those to independent contractors. You give those to employees. So if you're offering any form of any benefits, then you've got an employee situation. Permanency of the relationship. When you bring a worker in, how long are you really expecting them to be around? With a worker, it's an unknown. So, we don't know if they're going to be here today, if they'll be here tomorrow, whether they'll be here a year from now. And we, as business people, we know it's all going to be based on how they work out what our workload is. With an independent contractor, they're normally hired for just job to job. So once that job they're hired for is done, your obligation to use them ceases to exist. You don't have to use them anymore. Whereas with an employee, okay, they go and do this inspection, well, you are obligated with an employee to give them more work on the next inspection. So that permanency of the relationship is another type of factor that we look into. Service is key to the business. Is that worker providing services to the business that is key to keep that business going? Normally we hire employees to do those for us because they're so important. We want to keep control over that employee and over the situation for those key services to be provided to the businesses. With an independent contractor, we normally are outsourcing services that are not as key to the business and that we don't have to have as much control over. So those type of relationship factors come into this determination. So we need to look at those also along with behavioral and financial.
That's great information. Everybody needs to be clear that contracts don't work in this. He said that loud and clear. And I'll just throw a question. How would this play into that, Steve? Because we make each inspector, and I'm sure it's this way across the board with other firms, sign a no-compete, no-solicitation contract. Would that in itself reflect an employee relationship?
Yes, it would, because you're trying to protect yourself. You're making some commitments to there, but that's, again, that's a contract, and that's not a type of contract that I think is I think it is a factor whenever the IRS would look at it, because they say now you have set an expectation with that worker that there's going to be some permanency to their relationship. Right,
exclusive, to confirm.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then on employee benefits, I mean, all of us out there who have, multi-inspector firms, the employee benefits are a huge part of our compensation plan. I think that's kind of that way across the board for everybody, so just heads up on that. And then, permanency of the relationship. It is our goal to retain every inspector that we hire. I mean, it's got a lot invested in those folks, and the last thing you want is a constant turnover rate. So I think that speaks for itself. And then, we are 100% service oriented. And then other services that go with that beyond just being a home inspector would be, termites and radon or infrared or stuff. A lot of add-on services that you may require your inspectors to have certifications or licensing in. And a lot of times you're paying or helping pay for those licensing and certifications. So I think all that just points towards an employee type relationship.
Right.
So I think that answered that real well. The next question we have here is what is going to be required? Okay, we've determined that it is an employee relationship. So what is required when it comes down to that? We know he's an employee, so now what do we have to do?
Okay, we mentioned some of this earlier. When you pay that employee, you are required to withhold income taxes, federal, state, and local. There is an employee portion of the FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare. You withhold those. Also, as the employer, you have to match that Social Security and Medicare. So you're going to pay that in. You're also going to pay federal and state unemployment taxes. They are covered by unemployment insurance, and that cost is borne by the employer. Also, you're going to have proper paychecks issued, which means that paycheck should reflect on there. Here's the gross pay for the pay period. Here are all the individual deductions coming out. Here's your net paycheck. It should show that for the period that's being covered by the paycheck and also year to date. You'll be required to remit those payroll taxes that you withhold, plus that you have to pay on a periodic basis, whether it's to the federal, state, or local. There's filing of payroll tax returns that have to occur either on a monthly or quarterly basis. At the end of the year, you have to issue a W-2 to that employee showing them, here is how much you made, here are the deductions I've taken out, and then you have to send those W-2s to the Social Security Administration and state and local agencies for them to be able to ensure that that employee is now going to file their tax return. You have to carry workers' compensation insurance on your workers, so if they get hurt on the job, that insurance will pay to take care of them, pay their medical expenses, pay sick time off on that, and so that's covered. That's a big question a lot of people have when they get into the employee situation. It's like, oh my gosh, how much is that going to cost me? Well, here's the one thing to remember. Workers' compensation insurance rates are usually set by the state agencies, and each type of work done has its own rate of workers' comp insurance. So, as an example, an office worker is actually some of the cheapest workers' comp insurance you can have. Compare that to somebody working in a sawmill. Well, that insurance is very astronomical. So, you want to be careful how you have people categorized as what work they do, so when you have that workers' comp insurance, you can get them properly classified and pay the appropriate rate. Now, at this point, most of the employers at first are just going to throw up their hands and say, oh my gosh, this thing is just a headache. Truthfully, payroll is a headache.
Sure.
Trying to make sure it all occurs at the right time, that everything is paid, all the returns are filed. You know, for a small or any size employer, it is just an administrative headache. And that's where they probably want to look at some form of maybe an outside payroll service, maybe like an ADP, Paychecks, or even my firm. We do payroll for a lot of people. That takes that burden off of the employer. It facilitates that you get proper calculations, we get proper payments made, everything's calculated, the tax returns are filed. Takes a big burden off of you. And if you're doing that in conjunction with some things like direct deposit of employee checks, the paperwork side for you can be a whole lot less. So don't throw up your hands and say, I can't do this. It's more of an aspect of just finding the right people to help you get it done.
And that's where we, with the Savvy Inspector, we just took, there were several of us that individual coaches and brought a lot of folks from one-man shop to make their first hire. And the biggest hang-up that everybody has, as a one-man shop, slammed, busy, turning down work, could easily hire and keep that person busy, increase income for the firm, of course. But when they look at this, it's frightening and it's overwhelming. And so we just took them step by step, all of these folks, and we've got a nice little blueprint laid out for them to help walk through all the processes, not just the financial part of it here, to make that first hire. And what Steve has just said here, he's kind of got it laid out in bullet points here, but we can walk through that. We brought Steve on board as a CPA to help anybody that wants to pursue this. So it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It just has to be done. And
right.
And we've got the resources here, especially with Steve, to help make that happen. With all that being said, this is where the 20% more to have an employee comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
That's right.
So
because you're looking at, the employer side of the FICA is a percentage of the gross pay, and that's 7.65% right there. Normally, your state unemployment is going to run anywhere from 3 to 5%. You've got your workers' comp insurance on there. You have federal unemployment. So we're going to hit that 20% mark pretty easy in addition to that. Plus, the cost of having the payroll taken care of and run for you. So, yeah, that employee is a little costly. And a lot of times that we find that people will pay their employees a little bit less than what they would pay if it was an independent contractor situation, just because of the additional costs.
Exactly, and the comment's been made to us through the process in the past is, how can I hire somebody and not lose money? which is just a kind of an oxymoron, because if you can't sit down and figure that out up front, then you probably don't need to be making that hire. So
That's right.
It's always profitable. It gets more profitable as you add more employees, I'll give you that. But you can, if you're turning down, for example, 10 inspections a week that you could have another inspector covering, you're going to make some money if you can get this set up. So on the onset, looking at this, it looks like a huge elephant. And how do we eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And we've got this all laid out, especially with Steve's help here. So anybody that's listening, if you got questions, don't hesitate to go to the Savvy site and put in a ticket, and we can help walk you through this.
And then I just want to say real quick, you know, my background is in accounting and tax in the past too. And I've done my own taxes for years, and what a headache that has become. I've used the Intuit payroll system, which worked all right, but I still had a major headache of trying to keep up with these type of taxes. So moved over to Steve, and he has made the process very simple for us. He has helped me through this whole ordeal and makes it so easy to switch over to him and to get the payroll. He does everything for me now, from payroll to taxes to watching out for vacation pay for my inspectors. So he has made it just so simple to just get involved in this with him and let him handle everything. And then that frees you up to actually go on with something else that your business needs to concentrate on, and you're not stuck in this whole grind of working on these taxes and fooling with the employees every week. So definitely hats off to Steve. He's definitely made it more easy for me to spend my time building my business elsewhere.
Thanks, Sherri. Appreciate that. We try that really hard. We realize that a lot of businesses can lose a lot of productive time just from administrative side of the business. So we try to alleviate a lot of that. We know payroll is one of those areas that really can take a lot of time every pay period to take care of. So we try to help the business eliminate that within themselves and give them that chance to go back and turn that now gained time into productive money-making time for them.
Definitely.
Yeah, you know, Sherri and I are coming up close here to our 10-year mark in business, and Sherri has always done this up until we brought Steve on board for us. And what a nightmare! I mean, she has drug around that ball and chain for so many years, and especially at the end of the year when it comes to tax time, you just clock her out for about a month because she's just pulling hair trying to get all this together. So hats off to you, Steve. You've really freed us up quite a bit. And anybody out there listening, if you're considering it, definitely give Steve a call here. We'll have his contact info when we wrap this up and let him talk to you about that. So, all right, Steve, that was the tricky part, talking about the employee. I think the contractor is a little more cut and dry. So let's cover that. Let's talk about that.
All right. Our biggest concern when we have an independent contractor, if that individual we've hired or worker we've hired is an individual and sole proprietorship. When we get into that scenario, there's some paperwork we have to do. First off, you need to have them complete a Form W-9, which is known as the Request for Taxpayer Identification Number and Certification. That information on there, which will have their name, their address, their federal ID number or Social Security number on there, is necessary because if you pay that person $600 or more in a year's time, then you have to give them at the end of the year a 1099 MISC miscellaneous form for the total payments you made. A copy of that is sent to the IRS by you so the IRS can track and see that that person does file that income on their tax return. So you'll need to be able to have a way within your accounting system to be able to track those payments. A lot of your accounting systems now have that ability when you issue a check to track that check as a 1099 payment. So at the end of the year, you should be able to pull that information and have your 1099s done. So end of the year, you get this report, take it to your accountants, say, okay, I need 1099s prepared on these people. They will do it. Now, those 1099s have to be completed by January 1 so that you can have those in those independent contractor hands. By that point, they have to have those. That is a requirement. I don't think most people are going to care whether you get it to them on January 31 or February 10th, but just so long as you get it. So you're going to send a copy to the IRS when it's done so they have their copy. When you're dealing with independent contractors is liability insurance and workers' comp insurance. You want to get copies of certificate of insurance just to be sure that if something would happen on the job that you're not held liable for that. So proper certificates of insurance is necessary. We just finished up for a client the other day a workers' comp audit. It's a construction company. Was looking at all the independent contractors. to see if we had proper insurance on those. And there was a couple situations that they did not have proper insurance on their independent contractors. So the workers' comp insurance company said, okay, we have to cover them under our workers' comp. That just increased that construction company's cost because now they have to provide insurance on that company and their workers because they don't have the proper insurance. So you want to be careful on that. And you may need some other documents in there depending on what your business is and things such as bonding and things like that. So you just, from an inspector side, I don't think you're going to, if you're dealing with independent contractors, there's not too much you have to worry about unless they're individual sole proprietorships. If they're a partnership or a corporation, you don't have to issue that 1099 at the end of the year, so that headache is gone for you.
Excellent. Well, I know a lot of firms do, including us ourselves, contract out some work, and in our area, termite inspections would be a good example of that, where we do have, you know, a termite firm come in and do that part of the inspection, and then the billing goes through us and what have you. So I would see them as a contractor as you set that up. Same way with if you have maybe some mold work done or any kind of outside firm that you would bring in to perform, you know, inspections on that home above and beyond what you would do yourself in your firm. I would see those as contractors. So excellent. Now we've talked about, you know, defining the contractor versus employee. So let's look at a couple examples here. I know you've got these.
Sure.
So an example of an employee-employer relationship would be?
Okay. So we have ABC Inspection LLC. They've grown a lot over the last year, and the owner just can't keep up with all the work by himself, so he needs to hire an additional inspector. He expects to keep the worker for an indefinite period of time. ABC will determine the daily schedule for its worker once the worker has been trained by the owner. It will provide the computer, the software, and all the tools the worker will use. There will be a checklist that will be used for each of the inspections, and it will help them determine how it's to be inspected and what the worker needs to do. ABC will schedule all the appointments for the inspection, determine when the worker will arrive to the work, when they will be where, and also provide a proper uniform. ABC will either provide a vehicle for the employee to use or will reimburse them for their expenses of going to the inspections. ABC will provide business cards showing the ABC Inspections LLC name, address, and phone number, plus it will show the worker's name and position as inspector. The inspector report will be issued under ABC LLC's name and appropriate license number. The worker will be paid a commission on each inspection report, and it will be done on a weekly basis. The person requesting the inspection will be billed by ABC and will pay them for the services. This is a good example of an employer-employee relationship. ABC has control over when, where, and how the worker will work. ABC is controlling the entire situation. It has an investment in the tools that's being used. It bears the opportunity for a profit and loss and makes it apparent to the clients that the worker is ABC Inspection LLC. You know, in that scenario, and I think we brought it out indirectly in all of our talks, but you can see there how much control ABC has over the worker. And it's that one big word that is the biggest factor in this overall situation of a worker being an employee, is control. The more the control, the more that person is a worker or an employee for you. So in this case, ABC has an employee and will treat them as such.
Yes, I can't think of any firm out there that doesn't hit this. The arguments would be, well, I don't set their daily schedule. What I do is I will book inspections and make them available as a choice to them to accept or decline. So say our inspections are scheduled at 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. and I've got 5 inspectors. First come, first serve maybe is how you might do. I don't do it that way, but I know some firms do. So you'd post out there, I've got it at 9 o'clock and a 2 o'clock available on Tuesday. Who wants that job? Now, are we setting that schedule?
In a case like that, with it being that it's kind of first come, first serve, I would say it is not. You're not really setting the schedule because they have the opportunity to turn the work down. You know, in an employee situation, they wouldn't have that opportunity to turn it down. Okay. You would be saying, you're going to go here. Again, a control factor. You're controlling them. But if they have that opportunity from job to job to say, you know, I don't want that job, then I would say that's an independent contractor situation. I mean, that's one factor that leads to that. You know, we have to look at the other ones. How much are you doing the training for them? Are they using your uniforms? You know, looking at all the other factors. That's just one of the factors we're saying right now. It leads to an independent contractor. Maybe more of the other factors lead it to be to an employee situation.
Right. Thank you. That's kind of what I was getting at, because I don't know of any firm out there that's going to not hit the majority of these bullet points, especially when it comes right down to handling all the appointments and the billing. I don't know any firm that has the home inspector, their employer or contractor, or whatever they want to call them, the inspector that's working for them, issuing the billing or handling those appointments. The calls always come through a call center or to the office, and then the appointments are set up. And billing is sent out. So, and all the rest of this, from the business cards to the uniforms, the whole spill. Yeah. I can't see anybody, any inspection firm, passing this or going down these bullets and thinking that it would be a contractor type relationship. So thank you, Steve.
No problem.
And so we'll just step on now. We've talked about the employee-employee relationship. Let's give an example of an independent contractor. Maybe this will help clear up that mess as well.
All right. Well, since ABC has grown so much, they need a new building. They've purchased a building, but it needs to be renovated. So they hired Dick Smith to do the renovation. He's hired to do the job for $50,000. ABC states that the job must be done in 3 months and they must approve the final product. Smith must now determine how he will work on the building, what materials and tools he will need, and how he will renovate the building to meet the expectations of ABC. Smith's services to ABC terminates once this job is completed. ABC has no other obligation to provide work to Smith after this job. In this case, this is a definition of an independent contractor. ABC only has control over the acceptance of the final product and has set an expectation of when the work is to be completed. Smith is going to bear the opportunity for a profit and loss on this, since he is going to be paid a flat fee and he has to control the cost within there. He must schedule his own time to when he's going to work on the job, and he's going to be buying his own materials and tools for this. ABC will need to have Smith fill out the Form W-9 and issue him a 1099 MISC at the end of the year for the total payments made to him during the year. So this would be an example of an independent contractor.
Excellent.
As you can see in this scenario, ABC is not controlling all the details from the point of acceptance of the job to the completion of the job. That's Dick Smith's obligation, is how he gets from point A to point B. He's determining that.
Excellent example. Very, very good. Okay. And again, if you folks got questions, you can submit a ticket through the Savvy Help Center there, and we'd be glad to address that. All right, so just a little summary here to wrap it all up. I know there's a lot of information here, but I think it's pretty simple once you've laid it out the way you have, Steve, so I appreciate that. But let's sum it up for everybody, talk about the proper classification and why it's so important.
You know, it's very important you get this classification between independent contractor and worker determined. You know, it's one of those things that we don't want to come back and bite us because of an audit. Remember, control is the most important factor. That's the overall thing. The more control you have over a worker, the more their employee. You know, you look at behavioral, financial, and type of relationship factors in there, and you start asking yourselves questions about that. What's the situation like? Who's bearing the costs? You know, how am I doing benefits? A lot of different things. And the more you answer more positive, affirmative, that you're doing this, you're doing that, then the more that worker becomes an employee. Remember, hot button issue with the IRS. If you're getting audited, the IRS is going to look at your classification of workers as independent contractors and employees. Just remember that, especially if you have a situation where you have a worker that is pretty much doing the same job as an independent contractor, that is a real sticky situation that we find. You really have to have definition of job duties to differentiate why someone's a worker and why someone's an independent contractor. You know, there may be shops out there where they have some employees that inspectors, they're treated as employees, and they have some they're treated as independent contractors. You really got to be careful there, because in an audit situation, the IRS is going to say, well, there's really no difference between the two, the way you're doing it. and we're going to reclassify your independent contractors as workers. So you need to be careful how you have that set up between the two. Don't let that come back and bite you. But most importantly, look over this carefully, because this is a big hot button with the IRS. It's a big hot button with workers' comp insurance companies. Just a lot of different places now are looking for this scenario to reclassify independent contractors as workers. So be careful.
Very good. I know Ken Compton himself has talked about or touched base on over the last year how the IRS is really cracking down on this. So, and I know, Steve, we have touched base on this earlier in some other meetings that we've had, but I know there are some inspectors right now with their head on the desk thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Because they're paying as a independent contractor and should be an employee. So I know we've touched on this earlier, but just real quick, if I was in those shoes, and I realized that from January 1 to now I've been paying as independent contractors, and I need to switch to employees. What is the smartest, quickest way? What do I need to do if those shoes?
Well, you're looking to respect that if you come, basically, let's say, come clean that these should be employees. The IRS will kind of have a forgiveness program that allows you that if you say, all right, as of this date, they're all going to be employees from here on out, they will not go back on you and make you reclassify those people. But you need to do that as soon as possible. And then the next thing you need to do is get hold of myself, your tax person, whoever, and start setting up that process to convert everybody over to an employee, get your payroll services set up, get your employees set up within the services area, and start issuing paychecks, as soon as possible. So coming clean is not going to cost you as much as being caught. Okay? It's when you get caught by the IRS that it really hurts. But coming clean and going forward will be the best thing you can do.
Excellent. And you're talking about cost there, because I know some folks are thinking, it's going to cost me 20% more to have them as an employee. What's the alternative if you take that gamble and say, okay, they're going to be independent contractors, the money I save from not paying that extra 20%, is that going to cover the fines I get for doing it wrong?
Oh. No, remember this, if you get caught and they hit you for back taxes alone are going to run you about 12%. Then you're going to have penalties and interest on there, and that one's probably going to run close to 25%. So, if you get caught, you're looking at 37 to 40% on top of the cost of just the independent contractor by getting caught.
Beautiful.
So it's definitely a lot cheaper to come clean and go ahead and pay the 20% and go from there.
Exactly. I just want to make that clear because I know how some people think. They think like I do. So, So okay. Let's see. Okay, but Sherri's trying to give me a note. All right. Well, we'll wrap this up. Who is Steven Brewer? We've introduced him before. Good friend of ours, located right here as a CPA right here in Salem, Indiana. I've known Steve for years. Did not use him as a CPA. Sorry about that, Steve.
That's okay.
And and we used another local firm, and things just weren't going as well. The other firm was cheaper, so of course, that's the first thing everybody's got in mind. But we were having some issues there, so we had spoke to Steve, talked about his services, what he could do for us, and I was still a little hesitant because I'm a cheapskate. But after talking to him, he saved Sherri and I just boatloads of money.
$6,000 this past year that was saved by moving over to Steve's company.
Yeah, in our first go around there. So when I was looking at the difference between the cost of the two CPAs, I was real quick to make my decision with Steve when I seen just what he could save me alone was going to help pay for his services. So highly recommend that you give him a call and talk to him to see what he can do for you. No charge for that, Steve, if they want to call you, right?
Right, no charge on that. We'll be glad to sit down or set up a Skype or whatever scenario. If they're located outside of the state or whatever, we'll be glad to get on the internet and talk with you, and we'll go from there.
Excellent.
I also want to say he's got a cloud-based system that he works with for his accounting system, And the really nice thing about that cloud-based system is it doesn't matter whether I'm here in Salem, Indiana, or down in Florida for a workshop, or in Georgia. I can access that cloud-based system from anywhere, get any information that I need at any time. So that has made it really easy for our company as well to be able to access those accounts from anywhere in the U.S. to take care of important information there while we're out of town as well. So that's a great thing to have with an accounting system like Steve's. You get that freedom to move with it as well.
Let me give you an example. Our payroll system is cloud-based, and back a couple months ago, I was actually out on vacation. I was in Michigan having a nice fishing trip up there, and it come the day that I needed to process payroll for my office. So I just had my staff members text me their time, and I'm sitting in the hotel in Michigan. I get on the cloud-based system, enter the hours, press a couple buttons, and 10 minutes later my payroll's done.
Sweet.
You know, so I didn't have to be back at the office to do payroll. I just signed on our cloud-based system and did payroll from where I'm at. You could be sitting on the beach in Florida and do payroll if you wanted to. I wouldn't recommend it, but you know, you're on vacation in Florida. Who wants to think about payroll? But you know, it's possible to do it.
Yeah, but your company definitely makes it simple for all of us to not have to spend our time in this part of our business and allow us to move forward. So it definitely has worked better for us.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you heard that, you already know he works with small businesses on a variety of levels and can work in almost any state there. I guess all states, even maybe in Canada and what have you. So with it being cloud-based like that, so you know, he's helped us out tremendously. Sherri touched on it: payroll, profit and loss, our tax accounting stuff. Just takes a big load off your shoulders. So I would talk to Steve. If not him, of course, check around, see who else is available that might be able to help you in your area. But definitely talk to Steve. I'm sure he can help you guys out. His phone number's here, his email's here. So want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, if you got questions, go to the Savvy Inspector site, go to the help desk there, and you can submit a ticket to Ken or I, and we will get it on to Steve and try to make sure we get the right answers for you. Or just call Steve directly here. You've got his info and his email there as well. So